At my sister's housewarming, my family ambushed me about giving her my vacation home. Mom shrieked, "You don't even have kids, just keep walking with your dog." Dad roared, "Your sister has kids, you're just a barren waste." Sister cackled, "About time the family disappointment paid up." When I refused, Dad backhanded me while everyone cheered. That night, I made a call that destroyed them all. I never thought my own family would orchestrate my public humiliation, but here I am, 6 months later, watching their world crumble piece by piece. My name is Holly, I'm 34, and I learned the hard way that blood doesn't always mean loyalty. But sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions. It all started with what should have been a celebration. My younger sister Tessa had just bought her first house with her husband Grant, and they were throwing a housewarming party. Tessa, 29, had always been the golden child, married young, popped out 2 kids by 25, and somehow convinced our parents that she could do no wrong despite her string of poor financial decisions. I, on the other hand, was the family disappointment. Never mind that I had a successful career as a financial advisor, owned my own home, and had worked my ass off to buy a beautiful vacation cabin in the mountains. According to my parents, Robert and Marcia, my life was meaningless because I didn't have children. The fact that I was perfectly happy with my dog Rudy and my independence meant nothing to them. The party was in full swing when I arrived with a nice bottle of wine and a gift card for Tessa's new place. About 30 people were there, family, friends, neighbors. Tessa seemed genuinely happy to see me, giving me a big hug and thanking me for coming. For a moment, I thought maybe things were looking up between us. I should have known better. About an hour into the party, Tessa tapped her wine glass to get everyone's attention. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying that fake sweetness I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Grant and I are so grateful for all the support as we start this new chapter." Then her tone shifted. "Actually, there's something else I wanted to discuss while we're all here together." She looked directly at me, and I felt my stomach drop. "Holly, could you come over here for a minute?" The crowd parted as I reluctantly made my way to where Tessa stood. My parents flanked her on either side, and the look on their faces told me this wasn't going to be good. The conversations around us died down as more people turned to watch. "Holly," Tessa continued, her voice now loud enough for everyone to hear, "you know how tight money has been for Grant and me, especially with the kids and the new mortgage." I nodded cautiously, not sure where this was heading but getting a sinking feeling. "Well, we've been talking as a family," she glanced at our parents, "and we think it would be really generous of you to let us use your vacation cabin. You know, since you barely use it and we could really make some memories there with the kids." The way she said it made it sound like a done deal, like I'd already agreed. But I hadn't. In fact, this was the first I was hearing about it. "Tessa, actually," Mama interrupted, stepping forward with that smile that never reached her eyes, "we think you should just give it to Tessa and Grant. It would be the family thing to do." The room had gone completely silent now. I could feel 30 pairs of eyes on me, waiting for my response. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. "You want me to give away my vacation home?" "It's not like you're using it for its intended purpose," Dad chimed in, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd used to shut down my opinions my entire life. "Vacation homes are for families. You just go up there alone with that dog of yours." "That dog has a name," I said, my voice tight. "And yes, I go there to relax and recharge. It's my property that I worked hard to afford." Tessa laughed, but there was nothing pleasant about it. "Come on, Holly. Don't be selfish. Think about my kids, your niece and nephew. They deserve to have those experiences. They can have experiences at the dozens of other vacation rentals available," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. "I'm not giving away my property." That's when Mom's mask slipped completely. "You don't even have kids," she shrieked, loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "What do you need a family vacation home for? Just keep walking with your dog and stop being so damn selfish." The cruelty in her voice stunned me. These were the people who were supposed to love and support me, and here they were, publicly humiliating me for not having children, something that wasn't even entirely by choice. I'd struggled with infertility for years, something they knew but apparently didn't care about. Dad stepped closer, his face red with anger. "Your sister has kids, real responsibilities. You're just a barren waste taking up space and resources that could benefit actual family members." The word barren hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard Dad make cruel comments before, but never this publicly, never this viciously. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me? Tessa was practically glowing with malicious joy. About time the family disappointment paid up. She cackled. "Maybe this will finally make you useful for something." I stood there, shaking with rage and humiliation, as my own family tore me apart in front of a room full of people. Some were looking away awkwardly, others were watching with morbid fascination, but not one person stepped forward to defend me. I said no. I managed to get out through gritted teeth. It's my property, and I'm not giving it away. That's when Dad lost it completely. His hand came up fast, connecting with my cheek in a sharp backhand that sent me stumbling backward. The sound of the slap echoed through the suddenly silent room. And then, to my absolute horror, people started clapping. Not everyone, some looked shocked and uncomfortable, but enough people that the sound of applause filled the room. Tessa was beaming like she'd just won an award. Mom nodded approvingly. Dad straightened his shirt like he'd just accomplished something important. I stood there, hand pressed to my stinging cheek, staring at these people who were supposed to be my family. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain ever could. Fine, I said quietly, my voice deadly calm. I'll remember this. I walked out without another word, leaving behind the gift I'd brought and any illusions I'd still held about my family's love being unconditional. The drive home was a blur. Rudy greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, and I buried my face in his fur, finally letting the tears come. My cheek was swollen, my heart was broken, and I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. But as the initial shock wore off, something else started to take its place. Cold, calculating anger. I'd always been the responsible one in the family. While Tessa made one poor financial decision after another, I'd been the one quietly helping out. I co-signed her first car loan when her credit was shot. I'd lent her money for emergencies more times than I could count. I'd even helped with the down payment on the house we'd just been celebrating, though she'd sworn me to secrecy about that. More importantly, I'd been managing our parents' finances for the past 5 years. Dad had asked me to take over when Mom started showing early signs of memory issues and he was struggling to keep track of everything. I'd organized their investments, set up their retirement accounts, handled their taxes, and made sure all their bills were paid automatically. While Mom's condition had worsened over the years, she still had many good days, and on those days, she understood and appreciated my help with their finances. They trusted me completely with their financial lives. Tessa didn't even know I was involved. But here's the thing about being a financial advisor, you learn that money is power and power can be taken away just as easily as it's given. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started making calls. The first call was to the bank that held Tessa's mortgage, the one I helped her qualify for by co-signing and providing part of the down payment. I explained to the loan officer that due to recent family circumstances involving financial abuse and threats, I was concerned about my continued liability as a co-signer and needed to understand my options. I understand your concerns, Ms. Thompson, the officer said. While you can't simply remove yourself as a co-signer, you can formally request that we reevaluate the loan based on changed circumstances. Given what you're describing, we would need to reassess whether the primary borrowers can qualify for the loan independently. And what happens if they can't requalify? We would work with them on modification options, but if no suitable arrangement can be reached, the loan could potentially be called in. Perfect. The second call was to resign my power of attorney for my parents' finances. I documented everything meticulously over the years, and what I discovered was deeply troubling. Dad had been secretly funneling money to Tessa for years, money that was supposed to be part of Mom's care fund for her increasing memory issues. The loans he'd given Tessa were never repaid, totaling over $30,000. Most concerning, he'd been opening credit accounts in Mom's name without her knowledge or understanding, given her declining cognitive state. I documented everything meticulously. Screenshots, bank statements, email chains. All information I'd obtained legally through my role as their designated financial representative before resigning that role. The third call was to Adult Protective Services. I'd like to report suspected financial elder abuse, I told the intake worker. I have documentation of someone systematically taking money from an elderly woman with memory issues, including using her identity to open credit accounts. I provided them with everything, the bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers, evidence of the credit applications Dad had filled out using Mom's information, and documentation that Mom's cognitive decline made her vulnerable to this kind of exploitation. This is very serious, the worker told me. We'll need to start an investigation immediately. In the meantime, we'll need to freeze the accounts in question to prevent further exploitation. The fourth call was to Tessa's employer. See, Tessa worked as a bookkeeper for a small family business, and I happen to know that her boss, Mrs. Ellsworth, was very strict about her employees' financial integrity. A quick check of public records showed that Tessa had several recent judgments against her for unpaid debts, information that definitely hadn't been disclosed during her employment. I didn't make any accusations. I simply asked Mrs. Ellsworth if she was aware that Tessa had undisclosed financial judgments that might affect her bonding insurance, which was required for her position handling company finances. The fifth call was to the IRS. Those loans from Dad to Tessa? The ones that were never repaid and totaled over $30,000? Technically, forgiven loans over a certain amount are considered taxable income. And if Tessa had been accepting these payments without reporting them, well, that was tax evasion. I provided the IRS with detailed documentation of every transfer, every loan, and every gift that exceeded the annual limit. All information I'd obtained legally through my role as mom and dad's financial representative. But I wasn't done yet. The sixth call was to Child Protective Services. Now, I want to be clear, I would never make false reports about child welfare. But I didn't need to. Tessa's social media was a goldmine of concerning information that she'd posted herself. Photos of her kids in situations that CPS would definitely want to investigate. Posts about leaving the kids alone while she went out. Comments about using medications to help the kids sleep so she could have adult time. All publicly posted, all screenshot and documented, all genuinely concerning for child welfare. I simply compiled everything and submitted it with a request for a wellness check. The final call was to Grant's employer. Grant worked in construction, and his company had very strict policies about domestic violence, something about insurance liability and job site safety. The photos I'd taken of my bruised face, along with witness statements from some of the more decent people at the party who'd been horrified by Dad's behavior, painted a clear picture of a family with serious violence issues. I didn't accuse Grant of anything. I simply provided information about the family environment and let the company make their own decisions about whether this met their employment standards. Then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. The first domino fell 3 days later when Tessa called me, screaming. "What did you do?" She shrieked into the phone. "The bank is calling our loan. They want the full balance in 30 days or they're starting foreclosure." I removed myself as co-signer. I replied calmly. "It's my legal right. You can't do this. We'll lose the house. You should have thought about that before you decided to publicly humiliate me and demand my property." "Holly, please," her voice switched to fake sweetness. "I'm sorry about the party. Things got heated. But you can't punish my kids for your kids? The ones you were so concerned about having vacation memories with? Maybe they should ask their grandfather where all their grandmother's medical money went." The line went quiet. "What are you talking about?" Tessa asked, but her voice had changed. She knew. "Adult Protective Services is very interested in Dad's financial activities," I said pleasantly. "Apparently, stealing from a dementia patient is a serious crime." Who knew? The second domino fell the next day when Dad called. "Holly, we need to talk," he said, trying to sound authoritative but with a clear undertone of panic. "There are people asking questions about Mom's accounts." "I'm sure there are," I replied. I turned over all the financial records to the appropriate authorities. "You had no right." "I had every right. You gave me power of attorney, remember? That means I'm legally obligated to protect Mom's interests." "Funny how that works. Those were family loans. Those were thefts from a vulnerable adult," I corrected. "The police seem very interested in the fact that you opened credit cards in Mom's name without her knowledge." The silence stretched on for a long moment. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to face the consequences of your actions," I said. "Just like you made me do at Tessa's party." The third domino was the most satisfying. Tessa lost her job when Mrs. Ellsworth discovered not only the undisclosed financial judgments but also some creative bookkeeping Tessa had been doing to cover her own money problems. Apparently, borrowing from petty cash with the intention to pay it back later is still theft, even if you're planning to replace it. The fourth domino came when the IRS audit revealed that Tessa hadn't reported over $40,000 in forgiven loans and gifts over the past 3 years. The penalties and back taxes were substantial, and wage garnishment was immediate. The fifth domino hit when CPS did their wellness check and found conditions concerning enough to require parenting classes and regular check-ins. Nothing that endangered the kids immediately, but enough to create a very stressful situation for Tessa and Grant. The final domino was Grant losing his job after his employer decided that association with domestic violence situations created too much liability risk. But the chaos was just beginning. About 2 weeks after Grant lost his job, I got a call from my cousin Kendra, Tessa's best friend since childhood. Kendra had been at the party but hadn't participated in the applause. In fact, she'd looked horrified the entire time. "Holly, I need to tell you something," Kendra said, her voice shaking. "I should have said this weeks ago, but I was scared." "What happened at Tessa's party?" "It wasn't spontaneous." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "They planned it," she said. "I overheard Tessa, your mom, and your dad talking before the party started. Tessa said she'd been working on them for months about getting your cabin. She said you were too selfish to give it up willingly, so they needed to apply family pressure in front of witnesses, so you couldn't back down. The betrayal cut even deeper than I'd thought possible. They planned to ambush me? Tessa specifically said that if they did it publicly, you'd be too embarrassed to say no. She laughed about it, Holly. She said something about how you always crumble under public pressure and that you'd probably just hand over the keys to avoid more confrontation. I felt sick. The whole thing had been a calculated attack, designed to exploit what they saw as my weakness. They'd invited 30 people to witness what they thought would be my humiliation and surrender. There's more, Kendra continued. After you left, Tessa was bragging about how she'd been softening you up for months with sob stories about money troubles. She said she'd been documenting every time you helped her financially so she could use it as evidence that you always cave when family needs help. Evidence for what? She was planning to take you to court if the public shaming didn't work. She had this whole theory that since you'd been supporting her financially for years, it showed you had a family obligation to continue. She thought she could get a judge to force you to sign over the cabin as part of some kind of family support arrangement. The audacity was breathtaking. Tessa had been building a legal case to steal my property, using my own generosity as ammunition against me. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Kendra was quiet for a moment. Because Tessa called me yesterday. She's desperate, Holly. She's talking about coming after you for intentionally destroying her family. She's convinced that everything that's happening is because you're vindictive, not because she and your parents broke the law. She's planning something? I don't know exactly what, but she's been asking questions about your finances, your job, where you spend your time. She's also been trying to get mutual friends to take sides, telling them that you're a heartless monster who's destroying innocent children out of spite. This was exactly the kind of thing Tessa would do, play the victim while refusing to accept responsibility for her actions. But now I had advance warning, and I intended to use it. Kendra, I need you to do something for me, I said. If Tessa contacts you again, I want you to record the conversation. Can you do that? I guess so. But why? Because Tessa is about to learn that I'm much better at this game than she ever realized. After I hung up with Kendra, I spent the evening researching Tessa's social media accounts more thoroughly. What I found was a goldmine of incriminating information that painted a very different picture from the sob story she'd been telling everyone. While she'd been crying poverty to me and our parents, she'd been posting photos of expensive dinners, new clothes, and weekend trips. The timestamps showed these posts were from the same periods when she'd been calling me for emergency loans. She'd been lying about her financial situation to manipulate sympathy and money from family members. More damaging were the posts where she bragged about working the system and getting over on people who have more money than sense. She'd actually posted screenshots of text conversations where she mocked me for being such a sucker for helping her out financially. I screenshot everything and created a comprehensive file. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable to me 6 months earlier. I created my own social media campaign. I wrote a detailed post explaining exactly what had happened at Tessa's party, including photos of my bruised face and testimonials from the few decent people who'd witnessed the assault. I didn't have to embellish or lie, the truth was damning enough. But I also included Tessa's own posts showing her expensive lifestyle while claiming financial hardship, and her mocking comments about people who helped her, posts that were already public on her social media accounts. I let her own words reveal her character. The post went viral within our social circle. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of people commented with their own stories of Tessa's manipulative behavior, her unpaid debts, and her history of using family drama to get what she wanted. Several people mentioned that they'd felt uncomfortable at the party but hadn't known how to intervene. More importantly, Tessa's current neighbors and Grant's former co-workers started sharing their own experiences. It turned out Tessa had been borrowing money from neighbors with sob stories about medical emergencies and car troubles, the same stories she'd been telling me. She owed money all over town and had been lying about the reasons why. The social media campaign served another purpose. It created a public record of Tessa's behavior that would be very difficult for her to dispute if she tried to take legal action against me. Her own words, her own posts, her own documented pattern of manipulation. 3 days after my post went live, Tessa showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with a client when my assistant knocked on the door. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Thompson, but there's a woman here who says she's your sister. She's quite upset." Through the glass wall of my office, I could see Tessa pacing in the lobby, gesticulating wildly at my assistant. She looked even worse than she had at my house, disheveled, angry, and desperate. "Please reschedule my 3 p.m. appointment," I told my client. "I have a family emergency to deal with." When I walked into the lobby, Tessa immediately started screaming. "How dare you post that garbage about me online? You're destroying my reputation." "Your reputation destroyed itself," I replied calmly, very aware that my colleagues were watching. "I simply shared the truth about what happened." "You posted private conversations. That's illegal." "I posted conversations you shared publicly on your own social media," I corrected. "Nothing I shared was private." Tessa's face was red with rage. "You're a vindictive bitch, and everyone can see it now. Nobody believes your victim act. The comments on my post suggest otherwise, I said. In fact, quite a few people have reached out to share their own experiences with your behavior. You turned people against me. I didn't have to turn anyone against you, Tessa. Your actions did that all by themselves. That's when she made a critical mistake. Tessa pulled out her phone and started recording, clearly planning to capture me saying something she could use against me. Say that again, she demanded, holding the phone up. Tell everyone how you systematically destroyed an innocent family because you're a bitter, childless woman who can't stand to see other people happy. I smiled directly into her camera. What I did was stop enabling financial abuse and report criminal activity to the appropriate authorities. If you want to record this conversation, let's make sure we get the facts straight. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. Tessa, are you denying that you and our parents plan to publicly pressure me into giving you my property? That's not. Are you denying that Dad has been stealing money from Mom's medical fund to give to you? He was helping family. Are you denying that you've been lying about your financial situation while borrowing money from multiple sources? Everyone struggles. Are you denying that you stood by and applauded when Dad assaulted me? Tessa's face went white. She'd started this recording thinking she could catch me saying something damaging, but instead, she'd created evidence of her own guilt. You can't prove any of that, she stammered. Actually, I can, I said, still recording. I have bank records, social media posts, witness statements, and now this conversation where you haven't denied any of it. Tessa realized she'd walked into a trap. She stopped recording and tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said loudly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. You've already been involved in one assault. I won't give you the opportunity for another. Security arrived at that point. My assistant had called them when Tessa started screaming. As they escorted her out, Tessa turned back to shout one final threat. This isn't over, Holly. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. They already do, I called back. That's the problem. The video of our lobby confrontation, recorded by building security cameras, somehow found its way onto social media. Tessa's aggressive behavior, her inability to deny the accusations, and her attempt to grab my phone painted a very clear picture of who the real aggressor was in this situation. The fallout was swift and severe. Tessa's remaining friends distanced themselves from her. The few family members who'd been trying to stay neutral finally took sides, and it wasn't Tessa's side. Even Grant's parents, who'd taken them in, started asking uncomfortable questions about the kind of person their son had married. But Tessa wasn't done yet. A week after the office incident, I got a call from my attorney. Holly, I've received some interesting correspondence, he said. Your sister has hired a lawyer, and they're threatening to sue you for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and something called tortious interference with family relationships. I almost laughed. She's suing me for telling the truth about her behavior? Apparently. Her lawyer sent a demand letter asking for monetary damages and a public apology. They're also demanding that you cease and desist all investigation into their financial affairs. What do you think of their case? Frankly, it's garbage. Everything you've shared is either factually accurate or your own documented experience. The truth is an absolute defense against defamation. As for the emotional distress claim, they're going to have a hard time proving that when they were the ones who orchestrated a public attack on you. And the family relationship interference? Not a real cause of action in this context. You can't be sued for exposing criminal behavior just because the criminals happen to be related to you. My attorney paused. However, I do think they're trying to intimidate you into backing down. Tessa's lawyer is probably hoping you'll settle rather than deal with the hassle and expense of litigation. They picked the wrong person to intimidate, I said. File a countersuit. Within 6 weeks, the initial dominoes had fallen and my family's world was starting to collapse. Tessa and Grant were facing foreclosure, bankruptcy, tax liens, job loss, and CPS involvement. Dad was under investigation for elder abuse and fraud, with criminal charges likely. Mom was now in a proper care facility where her finances were protected, though she was heartbroken about Dad's betrayal. And me? I was sitting in my vacation cabin with Rudy, sipping wine and watching the sunset over the mountains. I'd also started spending time with David, a kind man I'd met through a hiking group, who found my independence refreshing rather than threatening. Tessa tried calling me dozens of times. So did Dad. Even some of the relatives who'd stood by and watched my humiliation started reaching out, suddenly very concerned about family unity and forgiveness. I blocked them all. The only person I stayed in contact with was Mom, visiting her regularly at the care facility. She was having more good days than bad, and on her good days, she was grateful that I'd protected her from Dad's financial abuse, though she was deeply saddened by his betrayal. I always knew you were the strong one, she told me during one visit. I just wish I'd been brave enough to recognize what was happening sooner. 3 months after the party, Tessa showed up at my house. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. Her car was a beat-up Honda that I didn't recognize, probably all they could afford after losing their nicer vehicles to repossession. "Holly, please," she said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." "I have nothing to say to you," I replied, starting to close the door. "Wait." She put her hand against the door. "I know you're angry, but my kids. They don't deserve this. They're going to be homeless." "Your kids are innocent," I agreed. "Which is why CPS is making sure they're in a safe environment with parents who can provide for them." "The parenting classes are humiliating," she said, tears starting to flow. "And Grant can't find work because of his record now. We're losing everything." "You already lost everything," I pointed out. "You lost it the moment you decided to attack me in front of a room full of people for not giving you my property." "It was just words, Holly. People say things when they're stressed." "Dad hit me," I interrupted. "And you applauded. You stood there and clapped while your father assaulted me because I wouldn't give you something that didn't belong to you." Tessa looked down at her feet. "I know that was wrong, no," I said firmly. "You don't get to minimize this. You orchestrated my public humiliation. You called me a family disappointment. You supported Dad calling me a barren waste. You cheered when he hit me. And now you want my help because facing consequences is hard? What can I do to make this right?" she asked desperately. I considered her question for a long moment. "Nothing," I said finally. "There's nothing you can do. You can't take back the words. You can't take back the humiliation. You can't take back the assault. And you can't take back the fact that you all showed me exactly who you really are." "But we're family." "No," I said, cutting her off. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. Family doesn't gang up on each other. Family doesn't physically assault each other. Family doesn't applaud when someone gets hurt." "Holly, I'm begging you. You're begging me now," I observed. "But where was this humility when you were demanding my vacation home? Where was this concern for family when you were calling me names in front of 30 people?" Tessa broke down completely, sobbing on my doorstep. Part of me felt bad for her, the part that remembered the little sister I'd grown up with, before she became entitled and cruel. But the larger part of me remembered standing in that room, hand pressed to my stinging cheek, while people applauded my humiliation. "I'm sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I'm sure you are," I replied. "You're sorry you're facing consequences. You're sorry your plan backfired. You're sorry you're losing your house and your job and your comfortable life. But are you sorry for how you treated me? Are you sorry for the years of taking advantage of my generosity? Are you sorry for standing by while Dad called me a barren waste?" She looked up at me, and I could see in her eyes that she was sorry, but only because she'd been caught, only because her world was falling apart. She wasn't sorry for hurting me. She was sorry for getting hurt in return. "Goodbye, Tessa," I said and closed the door. Over the following months, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Tessa and Grant had moved in with his parents in another state, having lost the house when they couldn't meet the modified loan terms. Dad eventually pled guilty to several charges related to elder financial abuse. The family members who'd watched my humiliation were now dealing with the social fallout of being associated with the scandal. But the legal processes moved slowly, as these things do. The IRS investigation took over a year. The elder abuse case wound through the courts for 18 months. Tessa's various financial schemes were investigated by multiple agencies over the course of 2 years. And me? I was thriving. I'd gotten a promotion at work, partly because I no longer had the stress and distraction of constantly managing my family's financial crises. My social life had improved dramatically once I stopped spending every weekend dealing with Tessa's latest emergency or Dad's demands for family gatherings where I was treated like a second-class citizen. Rudy and I spent weekends at the vacation cabin, hiking and reading and enjoying the peace. I'd started dating someone I met through a hiking group, a kind man named David who thought my independence was attractive rather than threatening. Most importantly, I'd learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. I'd been lonely for years, surrounded by family members who only valued me for what I could provide. Now I was alone by choice, but I had genuine friends, meaningful work, and a sense of self-worth that nobody could take away. Rudy remained my faithful companion through it all, and David had become an important part of my life, someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could give. The truth is, I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed themselves with their greed, their entitlement, and their cruelty. I simply stopped enabling them to avoid the consequences of their choices. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about what happened. The answer is no. I feel sad that it came to this, sad that people I loved turned out to be so different from who I thought they were. But guilty? Never. They made their choices that night at Tessa's party. They chose cruelty over kindness. They chose public humiliation over private conversation. They chose violence over respect. They chose to treat me like an ATM rather than a family member. I simply chose to stop pretending that their behavior was acceptable. The last I heard, Tessa was working retail and living paycheck to paycheck. Dad's legal troubles were ongoing, and the stress had taken a serious toll on his health. The extended family members who'd enabled their behavior were now dealing with the social consequences of being associated with elder abuse and financial fraud. As for me? I'm writing this from my vacation cabin, Rudy sleeping at my feet, a cup of coffee growing cold beside my laptop. David is coming up later for the weekend, and we're planning to hike to the waterfall I've been wanting to show him. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine. It's authentic. It's built on genuine relationships with people who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. And that vacation cabin they all wanted so badly? It's exactly what it was always meant to be, a place where someone who worked hard for what they have can find peace and happiness, surrounded by people who choose to be there because they want to, not because they think they're entitled to it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's simply removing yourself from the equation and letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. Sometimes it's building a life so much better than what you had before that you realize the people who hurt you actually did you a favor by showing you who they really were. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. And I'm living very well indeed.